let me say, what a great song and what a great message. What kind of person are you? What kind of person are you? Well, tonight I'm going to give you something that's going to be so practical. I'm going to talk about some good habits from a previous generation. I want you to take your Bible, if you would please, and turn to Job chapter 12, verse number 12. Job chapter 12, verse number 12. Job 12:12. Job 12:12. Once you find it, stand with me. We're going to read this one verse. I'm then going to quickly read another to you. Job chapter 12, verse number 12, the Bible says, with the ancient is wisdom, and in the length of days understanding. That word ancient there, I hate to say it, it really means the graying of the hair by age. Now, I'll tell you, first of all, this is not gray that you see. It's silver. And it started turning this way when I was in my 30s because it comes with wisdom. Now, let me read another passage to you. John 6:12 says, when they were filled, he said unto his disciples, gather up the fragments that remain, that nothing be lost. And let me pray. Father, bless us now. Help me tonight. The practicality of the sermon could be embarrassing, but I hope it's helpful. I don't mind personally being embarrassed, but I sure would like to help some people. Now tonight, use the sermon to help us, please, and we pray in Jesus' name. Amen. You can have a seat there. I just want to point something out to you. First of all, in Job 12:12, it talks about there's a wisdom in those that have lived some years. And that's something that every generation needs to understand. It's usually best not to look at people that are younger than you or your age. It's better to look at people that are older than you to find your examples in life. But I also want to point out to you that in John chapter 6, verse number 12, where it said, when they were filled, he said unto his disciples, gather up the fragments that remain, that nothing be lost. This, of course, is when Jesus was feeding thousands of people. And after they had fed the people, Jesus gave direction. He said, I want you to gather up the fragments that remain. Now, that's the leftovers. He said, I don't want that to be lost. In America, we throw away more leftovers than some countries get to eat. America is disobedient to the teaching or the concept. Jesus was talking about being frugal. He was talking about not wasting. I'm about to mention some people that are the world would call successful, not necessarily spiritually successful, but they're people that would be considered financially successful. Now, I want you to know, I'm not approving of all their behaviors or their philosophies. I hope you won't find me guilty of condoning. I want to show you, though, that even in some of these people that are in the world, they have some good ideas about being frugal. And the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to tell you about maybe their particular frugal habit, and then I'll tell you who they are. Then I'll tell you how much they're worth. For instance, this 88-year-old business mogul can afford to live in any home he wants. However, believe it or not, he still lives in a house in Omaha that he purchased in 1958 for $31,500. He's worth $143 billion. This is Warren Buffett, who's the CEO and chairman of Berkshire Hathaway. In other words, he bought a house way back when he started. He just stayed in it. He wasn't trying to keep up with the Joneses, but all the Joneses are trying to keep up with him. Right. Berkshire Hathaway owns companies like Dairy Queen, Duracell, and Geico. Geico, who I think has the funniest commercials in the world. Let me go to another. This man is a professor, and he's an early Google investor and is known for saving half of his restaurant meals so he could take them home and eat them the next day. He cuts his own hair and reuses tea bags. His name is David Cheriton. He's a Canadian businessman. He's worth $17.4 billion. Now, as I go through here and you see these little things that these people do, I hope it will help you to understand why you're not worth $1 billion. The next, this man is a fast food regular. He is loud and proud of his affection for McDonald's, KFC, and others. You know who that is? It's Donald Trump. Worth $6.3 billion. The next man, he wears a $10 wristwatch on a regular basis. His name is Bill Gates, the co-founder of Microsoft. He's worth $105.3 billion. The next man still drives his 1999 Honda Accord. His name is Jeff Bezos, founder of Amazon. He's worth $242.3 billion. Next man packs his own lunch, calls brown bag lunch every day from home. Now, his name is Charlie Reagan. He's the founder and chairman of the Dish Network. He's worth $2.6 billion. I wonder how he got 2.6. He probably didn't eat out every day. Next, this man is said to monitor the number of toilet paper rolls that are put in the trash by his employees. His name is Azim Pringa. He's India's wealthiest tech tycoon. He's worth $12.3 billion. The next, the man is frequently, he wears the very same gray t-shirt to work every day when he goes to the office. All you have to do is see a picture of him and you recognize that gray t-shirt. His name is Mark Zuckerberg. He, of course, is that American businessman who co-founded the social media service Facebook and the parent company Meta Platforms. He's worth $210.1 billion. But he wears a t-shirt, a very common t-shirt, every day. This woman uses a space heater to keep the part of her home in which she lives warm. She lives in a 775-room palace. Try to keep that warm in the winter. But she uses a space heater so as to not waste for the rooms that do not need heated. Her name is Queen Elizabeth. She's worth $600+ million personally. This last person, she uses coupons each time she goes to the grocery store, goes shopping. She's weird, but in this case, she's wise. She's Lady Gaga. She's worth $300 million. Hey, look, if a weirdo can do it, you can do it. When I got to studying this, I started looking at the frugal habits of people. I have a friend, he's worth multi-millions and millions and millions of dollars, but if you ever looked at him, you'd never know it. Every day, he wears a pair of blue jeans and a flannel shirt to work, and usually, they're old clothes. He drives an old beat-up pickup truck. He told me, he said, God didn't give me money to flaunt it. And he's helped this ministry. He's written us more than one large check. All I want to do is, I'm going to give you some habits from some previous generations that maybe we want to glance at. And listen, if you don't want to listen to these habits, that's okay. You can do it any way you want. But I think there are some just simple little things that maybe could help us a little financially. Let me start out with this one. Number one, if you go back to what we'd call the baby boomers, you go to some of those people from the previous generation or two, they pretty well worked hard at using only cash when they're purchasing things. And so that's the first thing I want to talk about, using cash. The Bible says in Proverbs 22:7, the rich ruleth over the poor, and the borrower is servant to the lender. You understand what the Bible teaches is when you go to borrow money, you use credit, you become the servant to the one that lended you the money. Here's a better way for me to put it. Might be a little too strong for you, but it's this. They own you. Yes, sir. They own your house. Right. They own your car. Matter of fact, they own your paycheck. You say they do not. Just don't make your payments for 3 weeks and they'll garnish your wages. You say, I'll stop them. I don't think so. Hey, when handing someone cash, it makes the money spent seem more real to you. You know why this generation spends money so quickly? Is they never see it. When you have to pay, I'd like to say, I do have a $100 bill in here. My wife gave it to me earlier. When you have to pull a $100 bill out of your wallet and you hand it to someone, read them and weep. But when you pull out that piece of plastic, so many times it doesn't even I'm trying to get it out of my wallet. It doesn't even represent anything to us. Right. We've forgotten the value of that dollar bill. Using cash means no possible interest, no credit card fees. I'll tell you what else. I think using cash can limit impulse buying. You know, if you have a credit card, you know the limit's $15,000. You can go buy what you want. But you paint the town red on Saturday night, you'll wake up Sunday morning and hate the color. Did you know that cash is accepted 98% of the time? Credit cards are not always. And there's something about this thing of using cash. There's a privacy thing. They don't get your credit card information. You say, well, they would never use it. Did you know that when you use cash, there's no chance of fraud unless you're printing bogus bills? Did you know there's no electricity needed when you pay cash? And there's no internet needed? All I'm doing is I'm going to tell you, if you go back a generation or two, they paid cash a lot. They had not lost track of the value of that printed bill and those coins in the pocket. Let me move on. Number 2, wearing clothes and shoes until they're not usable or wearable anymore. I get in trouble for my kids for this all the time. I've got some shirts I've been wearing since they were 2, and they get on me about it. But 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 7 and 8 says, "For we brought nothing into this world, and it is certain we can carry nothing out. And having food and raiment, let us be therewith content." The older generation, they're not as influenced by social media and fad clothing. You may look at them and say, look at that old fuddy-dud. Yeah, and they've got money in their pocket. And the bank doesn't own them. Bank owns you. Did you know that clothing is for warmth and to keep you from being uncovered? That's it. Nowhere in the Bible does it say, go impress everybody with your clothing. Have you ever heard the quote, waste not, want not? Just wearing clothes as long as you can while they're still in wearable saves money. It used to be that they say that clothing trends used to last 20 years. Now maybe 3, and with ladies it might not even last a year. You say why? Because the retailers want your money. Let me go on. The old generations, number 3, used to do a thing called bartering. How many of you have heard the word bartering before? All right. I didn't say bartending, bartering. Genesis 34:10 it says, "And ye shall dwell with us, and the land shall be before you. Dwell and trade ye therein, and get your possessions therein." Notice the word trade there. Barter means trade or exchange rather than using money. That means maybe you wash my car, I cut your hair. That'd be a good trade. I would give you a good haircut. Bartering. You babysit for me, and maybe I can pay you in food. I've got food that I can exchange. You say, oh, people don't do that anymore. Sure they do. But even if people didn't do it, there's nothing wrong with it. Right. Bartering. When you barter, there's no need for cash. Bartering even builds relationships. I think bartering cuts down waste. You say when you barter, see, you trade something that you don't need for something that you do need to someone that needs what you have that they don't have. Sounds pretty simple, but they still do it. The old generation did much more of that. Let me go on. Number 4, monitoring the thermostats in your house. Monitoring them in the seasons, if you will. Ecclesiastes chapter 4, verse 11, it says, again, if 2 lie together, then they have heat. But how can one be warm alone? The truth is, what God is concerned that we stay warm or comfortable for the sake of our health. But this thing of monitoring thermostats. Now, what happens today, most people, when the cold months come, they set their thermostat, and it stays there for months in a row. They never move it. And that's your choice. But let me explain. God tells us to be wise with what he's given us. You know that in the previous generations, you could go and visit their home, and there might be a whole level of their home that's shut off, and they're not putting heat or air in it at all. You say, why? Because they have 2 and 3 levels of a home, and there's only 3 people living in it, and that's a little overkill. Whether you think that or not, you can ask the people in the third world country that live in cardboard boxes. But they didn't heat that 3rd level or 2nd level of their home because there was nobody living there, and there was no need. I know people in those generations that in the evenings they turned their thermostat down because they were going to be covered up and warm, and it didn't have to be as warm in the house. There's people that would not heat their home when they were away from their home. They called it the vacant temperature. I think in your newer thermostats, it's probably got a setting called economy. If everybody in our home, if we go away somewhere and we're gone for a week, we set those thermostats down to where it doesn't have to be totally pleasant for a human being for a week. Why pay for the electricity? But, you know, if you got plenty of money and you're paying all your bills on time and you're saying, I'm not stressed financially, go ahead and set it anywhere you want. But I know this. I know the previous generation, these are the kind of things that they were careful with. Did you know that even curtains were an issue to the previous generation? You say, why? Well, curtains can block out the sun, which cuts down the amount of heat in the house, which then can increase the effect of the air conditioning, and the curtains worked like insulation to keep heat in or keep cool in and heat out or cool out. But today we don't think about that much, but at least I'm just telling you, when you look back to the previous generation, there were things that they did that were very practical and down to earth. And you say, well, all they're doing is saving pennies. I want to tell you this, and I'm going to say it again in a minute. Pennies make nickels, and nickels make dimes, and dimes make quarters, and quarters make 50-cent pieces, and 50-cent pieces make dollars. And if you're smart enough, you can make $1 billion if you'll reuse your tea bags and not spoil yourself. Yes, sir. Let me go on. Number 5, living below their means. You say, what does that mean? They don't spend everything they have. They don't spend everything they make. Proverbs 21:10 says, the soul of the wicked desireth evil. His neighbor findeth no favor in his eyes. And it goes on, and it talks about frugalness. Today, it seems like, and I'm not involved in social media, but when I have glanced, there are people on social media that do nothing but flaunt their possessions, their clothing, their houses, their cars. I really don't think God ever intended for Christians to be flaunting their possessions. But this will sound a little strong, but I think only a fool spends everything that they can get their hands on. I mean, they get everything they can, and then they spend everything that they got. Do you know that by living below your means, you will reduce stress in your life? If you can learn to spend less than you make, you'll reduce stress in your life. People that spend everything, some of you have a spending plan way out in front. I mean, I wish some of you could spiritually use your faith for God like you use your faith for your credit card. Man, you've got yourself committed way out there. Why don't you get that faith and use it for God? Did you know that when you spend below your means, it gives you hope for the future? It's actually a good plan for the future. What's wrong with, here's what you do. And when of course we had 4 children at home, and we had to feed them. We tried not feeding them, but you got to feed them. But I understand what it's like to have children and pay the bills. But I can remember more than one time, my boss would give me a raise. I took the amount of the raise and I put it in savings. We did not increase the level of our living when we got the raise. We did not let our expenditures expand to our income. We harnessed it. You say, well, why? We already knew we could live at the level where we were at when the raise came. So we made it so we were living below our income. Then this is what you can do. Save money. It's not as fun as spending, but it's less stressful. Okay. Did you know, you might not believe this, did you know that less money can be less problems? More money, more problems. You say, well, bring on the problems. Okay. You know what? I remember when the income of our church was $100,000 a year. Where's Martha at? I'll tell you what, Martha, it was easier than the $1 million that we take in a year now. You say, well, I'd like to handle $1 million budget. I'll let you. Especially when you have to raise it by passing the hat around and beg people to put money in a hat. This one point could change your life. Live below your income. But you can't get the average person to do that. And I promise you, those people that have made billions at some point in their life, that's exactly what they did. Let me go on. Number 6, buying generic items. And I'm taking you back a generation or two. Buying generic items is something that these people did that helped them. Proverbs 23:2 says, and put a knife to thy throat, if thou be a man given to appetite. You know, there are actually people sitting right here that won't buy generics because you'd be embarrassed. You'd be humiliated by it. I'm only going to purchase the highest level brand name. What makes you think you're special? But do what you want with your money. Did you know that many of the generic items, do you realize are produced by the very same company that made the other one? They just put a different label on it. I happen to know that because I worked for a company that made chainsaws. We did 7 different chainsaws for 7 different companies. All the chainsaws were different, but we had a different color casing on them, and we put different labels on them and boxed them differently and sent them out. It's amazing. I thought, stupid chainsaw buyers. But buying generics is something the previous generation did. See, today we spoil ourselves because of our fleshly passions. And I'm not saying that all generics are equal to a higher brand name, but according to an article in Money Manual, buying generic can save you 50% on your food bill. Generic medications can be requested. Now, if it's a medication that has been approved by the FDA, then it's got a safety approval to it. Most generics are of decent quality. They're just not packaged as attractively. But there are people today that would never consider buying something generic. It's beneath them. You know what the duck said when he was finished shopping? He said, put it on my bill. Let me move on. Number 7. The previous generation, they were not afraid to use coupons. You know that the retailers, they put coupons out everywhere. They're out there. Proverbs 10, verse 4 and 5 says, he becometh poor that dealeth with a slack hand, but the hand of the diligent maketh rich. He that gathereth in summer is a wise son, but he that sleepeth in harvest is a son that causeth shame. A coupon, why pay full price for something when you could save a little? You say, well, I'd be embarrassed to use a coupon. Okay. I would be embarrassed if couldn't pay all my payments. I'd be embarrassed if I was paying outrageous interest rates because I'm running behind on my payments. I'd be embarrassed with that. But when you use coupons, you're basically utilizing a sale. So you watch for sales, you utilize the coupons. Coupons are provided in books, they're in newspapers and magazines, online, they're social media. When you get an app for a given store, they often shoot out coupons of all sorts. Maybe instead of looking at some of the stupid, nasty stuff that you look at with some of the internet access, it'd be a good idea for you to maybe do a little research and find some coupons and save some money. So I don't need it. Well, then just give it to the church. Save it and give it to the Lord. Do you know that some coupons, you can get things free, especially when they're pumping a new product. If they have a new product and nobody knows about this product and they really want to get the product out there, they'll send out coupons. You pick it up for free. You know, you can buy more when you use coupons. It makes new products more affordable. You know, I know this. I think right here in town, and I won't mention the stores, but I know there's at least one store that we have access to shop at. They have double coupon day and triple coupon day. In other words, you bring a $1 coupon in for something on double coupon day, they'll give you $2 off. Now you say, what's the big deal about $1? Dollars, if you can save $1, you could probably get enough of them to have $5 saved. And you get enough of those, you could have $10 saved. And then you could save 20 or 30 or 40. Maybe you could be a billionaire, but probably not, because $1 doesn't mean anything to you. Let me go on. Number 8. The previous generation, they were penny wise. Penny wise. Proverbs 21:20 says, there is treasure to be desired and oil in the dwelling of the wise, but a foolish man spendeth it up. When I see a penny on the ground, I still pick it up. You say, what's a big deal about a penny? It might not be to you. But have I said this? Did you know that pennies added together make up nickels, and nickels dimes, and dimes quarters, and quarters 50-cent pieces that make up dollars? Yeah, and there may come a day when you might need $1. But the previous generation, they were penny wise. We waste pennies today. I remember my mentor telling this story. He had been trying to teach his son about the importance of money and budget and everything. And they had gone somewhere, and his son took some money and threw it in a fountain. And I remember my mentor telling me, he said, I had my son climb in the fountain and pull out his money. I told him, we're not throwing money away. Now, you're going to go pull out everybody else's money out of the fountain. That's not what I'm talking about. But he was trying to teach his son the importance of those coins. Don't waste pennies. Be prudent. And what is it talking? What's penny wise mean? It means spending small amounts of money wisely. You see, some of you think you're very accomplished financially because you're careful with big amounts of money. Become wise with small amounts of money. For instance, if you work here at this church, let's not be throwing away paper clips. And don't waste paper. And stop leaving the lights on in the rooms all around this. I walk around I feel like a dad at the church. I'm walking around, I'm turning out lights, I'm picking up things that are necessary and making sure they don't get put in the trash. It's not my money. And really, it's not yours, it's the Lord's. Right. Do you know, really, honestly, every penny you have, who does that belong to? Is that yours? Who gave that to you? You say, well, I earned it with my own hands. Who gave you those hands? Who gave you the air that you sucked in while you used your hands to get your money? On whose earth were you standing when you earned it? Whose food were you eating? It's why I earned that food. Well, who made that chicken? Or beef? Whatever you want to eat. I remember my dad teaching me this. I took my 1970 Nova, which was my first car, and we took it to the gas station. And I put my gas in, and then I turned off the pump. And then my dad said, pull the handle, pull that lever on the pump one last time. And after I turned off the pump, I got all the gas that was left in the hose. And my dad said, you got some pennies of gas in there. I imagine I've gotten gallons and gallons of gas through the years because my dad taught me how to turn off the pump and squeeze that handle one last time. You say, silly and a waste of time. I'd really like to take a look at your finances. You may impress everybody, but God knows truth. Hey, look, I'm investing in beef broth right now. I hope to be a billionaire. I was reading a story about a man named Elza. Listen to this. For 45 years, he saved every penny he could find. He'd pick pennies up off the ground. When he could, when he would get his change, he would ask for pennies, and he just gathered pennies for 45 years. When he cashed them all in, he took them in when he was 73 years of age, and the person at the bank just happened to be good to him and said, you know, I mean, he just had a truckload of pennies. And they said, you ought to let somebody sort through these for you. Now, he had never thought that any of them would have much value, but he knew he had a lot of pennies. A lot of pennies, 45 years worth. He said it became a passion, and this is what he did. He felt like every time he found a penny, it was a gift from the God that loved him. He said he saved them all. 73 years of age, he took them in. The banker, the teller said, maybe you ought to have somebody sort through some of these. He did. He made over $100,000 off his pennies. You got an extra 100,000 laying around? How'd he do it? Pennies. I don't have any pennies in my pocket, or I would show you one. Because this is what I learned, that pennies add up to nickels, and nickels to dimes, and dimes to quarters, and quarters to 50-cent pieces, to dollars, to $5, to 10, to 20, to 50, to 100. You know, everybody has to go through the same process to get to the million or the billion. Let me go on. I've just got a few more. Stay with me. Number 9. What did the previous generation do that helped them? Well, they didn't eat out all the time, and they learned how to reuse or to eat leftovers. In other words, it didn't get eaten on Monday and it was eaten on Tuesday. Just so you know, some things taste better that way anyway, and some things don't. I have, you're going to think this is a cop-out. I've worked pretty hard at losing weight, but for years, if I put something on my plate, I clean my plate. Now, I learned the simple process of just not putting so much on my plate. But this is, at my house, I say this all the time. Someone will say, you want something to eat? I'll say, what's left over in the refrigerator? I'll eat it. You say, why? Well, I paid for it. I worked hard to pay for it. If you're not careful, you just get rid of it all. Somebody needs to be willing to be careful not to waste. DoorDash and Uber Eats were not around 100 years ago. Just think of how much money we tip. Now, when I go out and I eat at a restaurant, I always tip, and I tip relatively well. Around Christmas and Thanksgiving, I'll tip more than my meal cost, because I know that they always don't make as much money when they're waitressing. But today, people, they eat out all the time. I wish I could just say to someone, don't be ashamed to carry your lunch to work. You say, that's what poor people do. That's what rich people do. That's how rich people got rich. Did you know that using leftovers is a great money saver? You say, that sounds silly. That's okay. I'm just telling you about the previous generation and some of their thinking. And so you know, the ones that built the United States of America. You may think the previous generation were a bunch of stupid idiots. No, this is a powerful country. Matter of fact, so powerful, when the stock market wavers, everybody panics. But you know, the previous generation are the one with their money and their hard work and their ingenuity that built this whole thing. Let me go on. Something they did. They bought bulk groceries and just some old school food-saving techniques. Proverbs 31:14 says, she is like the merchant ships, she bringeth her food from afar. It's talking about a lady that's careful with money and how she spends her money for her household. I don't know if you understand the terminology, When I grew up and at my house as my kids grew up, but I watched my mom can food. You say, what? She canned her own food. Have you ever heard of we use ball jars. And we have a garden, and we'd take our own green beans and we'd can them. And I don't think everybody's going to do it, but it's still doable. It's still okay to do. Gardens can save money. But if you look back at the previous generation, they did some self-serving. And they were strong in their financial sense. Let me go on. I've got 2 more left and we'll be done. Number 11. This will freak you out. They live by a budget. That almost creeps people out, especially at the beginning of the year. Living by a budget? Luke 14:28 says, "For which of you, intending to build a tower, sitteth not down first, and counteth the cost, whether he have sufficient to finish it?" Here's what a budget is. The budget becomes your money dictator. See, your problem is you don't have anybody bossing you around financially. What you do when you have some good sense, you develop a budget. You say, what's the budget do? The budget is your roadmap. Your budget tells you what you're to spend your money on. The budget says to you, you've got this much money for your house payment and this much money for fuel, and you've got this much money for food. You can't spend beyond it. And your budget bosses you around. A budget is a money spending and a money savings plan. And I don't know if you'll believe this, but if you don't have a budget, you're probably spending money emotionally. This is what I feel like doing. Now, I'll tell you, when I do what I feel like doing, that always gets me in trouble. When I do what I do by principle, that keeps me in line. You should control your money. It's not to control you. You're to tell your money what to do. It's not to tell you what to do. Old timers, they had also what they called an emergency fund. They lived below their means. They had an emergency fund so that they could stay with their planned budget. And if an emergency arose, the emergency fund paid for the extra expenditure, and it didn't blow their budget to smithereens. Have you ever heard someone say saving for a rainy day? Where's Rainy at? Are you in here, Rainy? Rainy's famous tonight. There's our rainy day right over here. Everybody should save for rainy day. Amen, Rainy? But we hear that, saving for a rainy day. Do you? Do you save for a rainy day? Budgeting is telling your money where to go instead of wondering where it went. Did you know this? And listen to me. Debt problems are almost always budget failures. Debt problems are almost always budget failures. You say it couldn't be. I didn't have a budget. There's your problem. One last quick point. The previous generation did what they could to avoid unnecessary debt. I want you to know, I do not think borrowing money is sinful. When you borrow money and you pay interest, it's like renting money. Things become sinful when you can't make your payments and you're not wise in how you handle it. But you got to remember, if you do borrow, you can tell everybody that you own that $400,000 home. But you want to talk to the bank about before you do anything, because they're going to tell you you have to have insurance on it, and they're going to tell you what to do with your home that you think you own. Psalm 37:21 says, "The wicked borroweth and payeth not again, but the righteous showeth mercy and giveth." Romans 13:8 says, "Owe no man anything but to love one another, for he that loveth another hath fulfilled the law." I'll just warn you so you know, it's been my experience that most lending institutions will lend you more than it is wise for you to borrow. And they're even careful, but they will lend you more than what they probably should. Remember, you're to control your credit card. Don't let it control you. I'll give you a little challenge, and I realize some of you are beyond this, and I don't even mean that in a sarcastic way. But I'll give some of you a challenge. Put your credit card away for 2 months. Reel yourself in financially. I've done that to myself before. I have actually taken my credit card, put it in an envelope, and stuck that envelope in the top drawer and said, I'm not using this for a while. It just gives me too much freedom. Now, thank God, our church, I look out and I look at all the young people. There are a lot of young people here. Young people, look at this man that's standing before you. I wish I would have saved more money. I wish I would have been more thrifty. I wish I would have given the Lord more. I wish I would have planned better for retirement. I wish I wouldn't have bought things that I did not need. I wish I wouldn't have eaten out so much. That's what I wish. Anybody here got a few years on you that could agree with me? Anybody like that? You say, oh, man. Well, that's funny. Look at the previous generation young people, and you might want to listen to some people that are just telling you, don't allow yourself to get to the latter end of your life and say, I wish I would have, but I hope you can say, thank God I did. Instead, I wish I would have. Did you know that interest gets expensive? I wish every person that ever bought a house would take a look at how much money over the lifetime of their home they paid in interest. Now, there's a big deal to this. Is it a 10-year loan, a 20-year loan, a 30-year loan? Is it 5%? Is it 6%? Is it 7%? There's far more to this thing than I got money, I get to buy a house. Well, you know, you have to pay the payments. And when you look at the amount of interest, again, I'll go back to some of you have powerful faith when you want to get something for you. I wish you'd use that faith for your call to the mission field, but probably won't. We'll use it to get the car. We'll use it to get the house. We'll even use it to take an elaborate vacation. We've got faith. Oh, when the pastor says, let's have a double tithe Sunday. Well, that's ridiculous. Say, are we going to have a double tithe Sunday? No. Triple. Do you know why did the football coach get into a fight with the vending machine? Because he wanted his quarterback. Why did the woman walk around with her purse open? Because the forecast was change in the weather. If you've listened to what I've said, you might not agree with all of it, but I'm going to tell you that a whole lot of common sense when we look backwards to the previous generation. And to be honest, if I did not routinely let you out like I do, I could go on for the next 4 or 5 hours talking about the practical little things that our forefathers did to keep themselves from being full of financial anxiety. Do you know that one of the 4 major causes of marital destruction and divorce are finances? Finances tear up churches. Finances tear up families. Finances tear up countries. Did you know that if you'll get your finances where they ought to be, you'll sleep better? Sleep more. Job 12:12 said, with the ancient is wisdom. And I just loved it, and I'm done. I loved it when I read John 6:12. Jesus was in charge. They just fed thousands of people. And he said, when they were filled, he said unto his disciples, gather up the fragments that remain, that nothing be lost.